were introduced to Gideon and his call by God last week. This week we'll be in chapter 7 of the book of Judges. And we talked about the fleece and Gideon's questions of just trying to believe and understand that God was truly calling him to this. And we talked about the destruction of the altar to Baal and him butchering his daddy's fat bull and making a sacrifice to God rather than to Baal. And so we're going to pick up in chapter 7 and verse 1. It says, "Then Jerubbaal, who is Gideon," you remember they renamed him because of his dad bailing him out, basically saying, "Let Baal plead for himself," and so that's what they wind up calling Gideon. So Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him rose up early and pitched beside the well of Harod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, "The people that are with thee are too many for thee to give the Midianites into their hands." Too many soldiers. I absolutely love this chapter of Scripture for a lot of reasons. But one of the main ones is this right here. Watch what God is going to do. You know, there's a country music song about "I've never had too much fun," right? So too much. I mean, too much dessert, too much fun, too big an army, too fast a car. There's certain things that you say, what? That doesn't exist. I mean, catch too many fish. No such thing. Kill too big a buck. Just start going through the things that, win too many games, make too many baskets. We like to think big. We as Americans have been trained to think big. I can't tell you, I had a discussion not too long ago, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, I have no problem paying extra to make sure that I get the very best with certain things." And yet, many times we see in Scripture, God uses small things. As a matter of fact, the prophet tells us not to despise the day of small things, because God does that many times. And so Gideon has amassed this massive 32,000 man army, which is what God told him to do. God told him, call your family, called his family, call the tribe, calls the tribe, call the next tribes over from the joining tribes of Asher and Naphtali. And 32,000 men respond to this because they're sick of the Midianites. They're ready to go to war. And so they've got this huge standing army there, 32,000 men. And he says, "They are too many for me to give the Midianites in their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves." That means to be proud of yourself, to be boastful against me, saying, "Mine own hand hath saved me." One of the greatest hindrances, I think, for men, I talked about this a little bit on Sunday, men in America, is the idea that we have pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. We love this American idea that I did it on my own. I built it myself. I built it from the ground up and all of this kind of thing. Well, that is a massive hindrance to dependence upon God. It just is. And lots and lots and lots of people have been taught that, to ask for help is weak or to depend upon someone else is weak. And so God's going to take this big army and he's going to reduce it. And he's going to do it so that they don't say, "We did this. Our might, our strength, we were able to accomplish this on our own." This is not a political victory. And God's going to make very sure that nobody thinks that it is. "Now therefore," verse 3, "go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead." If we were to go back and remind ourselves in the book of Exodus, this was always a determination for Israel prior to war. And I listened several years ago to a man talking about some of the wars that were fought in Russia. And one of the things that they would do is they would send the trains, because all the cities were along the train tracks. They would send the train into town. They would conscript every available man to go to war. He'd get on the train, they'd hand him a rifle, they'd hand him a magazine, maybe 10 bullets in your possession. They'd take them down the road. They'd open the doors at the front, and they had soldiers standing at the cars. They would shove these men off the boxcars, and then they would hold them at gunpoint and tell them to go to the front and fight. And if they tried to retreat, well, they'd be shot by Russian soldiers, by their own soldiers. So they had no choice but to go and fight. It wasn't a war they believed in, wasn't anything that was that they had an interest in. They were just told to go and fight. Israel always let anybody that was afraid or fearful go home. I think it's a great idea. How'd you like to be going into battle with some guy who's terrified? He's probably going to shoot you in the foot or the back, or right in the middle of the battle, he's going to turn tail and run. I mean, this is not the kind of soldier that you want. So he says, okay, if anybody's fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And they returned to the people 20 and 2,000. And there remained 10,000. 22 of these guys are afraid. They're like, hey, this is our out. Let's go. No harm, no foul. No shaming you for leaving. This is at God's direction, okay? And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. 10,000. They're going to go up against the Midianites. Bring them down unto the water, and I will try them there for thee. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, this shall go with thee, the same shall go with thee. And of whomsoever I say unto thee, this shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. So this is God's determination. They go down to the water. So he brought down the people unto the water, and the Lord said unto Gideon, everyone that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. Likewise, everyone that boweth down upon his knees to drink. And the number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, were 300 men. But all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. And the Lord said unto Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand, and let all the other people go, every man unto his place. So, just so we put all that together, the dog lappers, you know, when you first hear that, you think that they're down on their face, right? And they're lapping water. Can anybody here lap water like a dog? Can you turn your tongue backwards? I can turn it forward, but only inside my teeth. I can't really turn it up. And I wouldn't get enough water to get a drink if I did that. But dogs lap backwards, right? So it's kind of confusing. But one group of men came up there, and they set their sword down, and they got down on their knees, and they took their hands and they scooped up water like this, and they got a drink. And he said, all of them can go home. And the other group of men kept their sword in their hand, whichever was their fighting hand, and they walked to the water and they went, and they got a sip. And they got a sip. And they got a sip. And God said, those are the ones that I want. And there were only 300 of those men. That takes a little while to get a drink that way, if you've ever tried. You're just kind of splashing a little water in your mouth. But the guys who got down on both knees and used both hands had to set their sword down, had to set their spear down, had to set their shield down, and they were completely vulnerable as they got a drink. And the dog lappers, well, they had their eyes on the horizon. They weren't going to be taken by surprise. I don't know if that really plays into it or not. But God wanted a particular group of people. Now, this could be totally arbitrary. He just said, everybody who pushes the food on the back of their fork are the ones I want. So he would have had a complete South African army had he done that. But he uses this particular distinction to do it. So what you want to think is the dog lappers are down there licking water out of it. But that wasn't what was going on, because you can't get a drink that way. Does that make sense? I'm thinking that was what was happening. This is really important stuff to me. For the rest of your life, you're going to think about the dog lappers, and when you do, I want the image in your mind to be accurate. So, the people took victuals in their hand, their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man unto his tent, and retained those 300 men, and the host of Midian was beneath him in the valley. 32,000 to 300. Why would God do something like that? Turn with me, if you will, to 2 Chronicles chapter 11. chapter 14. I did my devotional this morning on this. And the Bible tells us there, in the time of King Asa, that Asa had an army of men that bare targets and spears out of Judah, 300,000, and out of Benjamin that bare shields and drew bows, 280,000. It's 280,000, so almost 700 or almost 600,000 soldiers. And these were mighty men of valor. And there came out against them Zerah the Ethiopian with a host of 1,000,000. That's 1,000,000. So 680,000 sounded like a bunch until you saw a 1,000,000-man army come up against you, right? So outnumbered. And Asa went out against him, and they set the battle in array in the valley of Zephathah at Marishah. And Asa cried unto the Lord his God and said, Lord, it is nothing with thee to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. Man, I love this prayer. Do you think Asa had Gideon's force, his fighting force in mind as he prayed this? You know, as Asa looks back on history, he realizes that it doesn't matter how big the army is, as long as God's on your side. He's thinking about Joshua. He's thinking about the other battles that have been fought, the battles in the wilderness that Moses led the people in. And he says, it's nothing for you to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. You know, I think one of the things that we always need to remember is you don't have to have a gigantic bank account to accomplish what God has called you to accomplish. You don't have to have a massive fighting force to accomplish what God's called you to accomplish. The question is are you doing what God has called you to accomplish? That is the massive question. Because, wherever God guides, He provides. And it doesn't make any difference the size. One time I went to a pastor's conference and there was a book on the table. I picked it up and it was on church growth. And I just picked it up and was flipping through it. Within the first chapter, the guy says, unless you have 250 people in your church is not viable. So I went ahead and bought the book. Not because I liked it, but because I couldn't believe that somebody would make a statement like that. So I went home and I did a little bit of research. Does anybody know what the average church size in the United States of America is? Like 50 or 60? Something like that. I mean, when you take all churches all the way across the country and you take and average that, even put the mega churches in on it, which is going to up your average quite a bit. But it's definitely less than 250. And does anybody know what the word viable means? It means to be alive, to have life. And I read that and I said, you know what's funny is the Master said where two or three are gathered together, that He's there in their midst. There's not one word about the size of a congregation in the Bible. This guy is he calls himself a pastor. And man, it just came all over me. Because how many guys have been discouraged? I wasn't discouraged. I just got frustrated as I read that. How many guys have been frustrated and discouraged because they read that and they say, I pastor this little church in Eden. How am I going to get 250? 250 people live in Eden. Very best. Grady. You know? How many little bitty towns in Texas are? Oh, all those people those towns need to die, and everybody needs to move to the city so we can have these big churches that are actually viable. Is that? No! That's foolishness. That's ridiculous. That's anti-Bible, anti-God, and it's so frustrating when you hear that kind of, and that's just garbage. Because it doesn't matter how big your army is. If you're doing what God has told you to do, God can deliver with a handful or with a gigantic, massive army and resources. But at this point in time, the thing that God was most concerned about was that the people would be boastful that they had whipped the Midianites because of their own power and their own strength. And He did not want that to take place, okay? And I wonder sometimes in our own lives, I wonder if God doesn't have that in store for us as well. I wonder if He wants to achieve victories in our lives that there's no answer except, wow, God did that. because I couldn't have, I think he does. So it says, verse 9, it came to pass the same night, the Lord said unto him, Arise, get thee down unto the host, for I have delivered it into thine hand. It kind of sounds like the days of Joshua once again, doesn't it? Here's the victory. It's a done deal. Past tense. Isn't that great? Wouldn't it be fun at the beginning of a football game for somebody to walk up and go, I have delivered the enemy into your hand. Go, run the ball, right? Just wouldn't that be great? Girls are going to be playing volleyball. Wouldn't it be great? Somebody just prophesies and says, I have delivered those other volleyballers into your hand. Wouldn't that be? I'm not saying that. I hope y'all do great. But anyway, verse 10. But if thou fear to go down, go thou with Purah, thy servant, down to the host. Now watch verse 10. Verse 10 is so, I think, one of the reasons I guess that I love the story of Gideon is because how of the mercy and the kid gloves that God handles Gideon with. Okay, so you want me to do the thing with the fleece. All right. Okay, so you want me to do it again, this time the opposite way. Okay, if you're afraid, I've told you what you're going to do, but if you're still afraid, let me give you another sign. And that really is what he's going to do. Let me give you another confirmation that you're going to have victory. And thou shalt hear what they say, verse 11, and afterwards shall thine hands be strengthened, and go down unto the host. Then went he down with Purah, his servant, unto the outside of the armed men that were in the host. He's talking about the Midianite host. So they're sneaking down there at night up to the Midianite camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay along the valley like grasshoppers for multitude. I just had this thought as I was reading this. God uses the term grasshoppers as a metaphor to describe the way the Israelites were viewed by the giants in the land of Canaan. And he also uses it here to describe the multitude of the Midianites. So there are a bunch of them, all right? And their camels were without number, as the sand by the seaside for multitude. And so you got 300 men. You have reduced your army from 32,000 to 300, and it is uncountable, the number of the enemy. So when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellows. So they sneak down to this random spot within this unlimited number of enemy camp. And it just so happens, as they get down there within earshot, that he hears one of the Midianites tell his buddy a dream. And he said, Behold, I dreamed a dream. And lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came into a tent, and smote it that it fell, and overturned it, and that tent lay along. And his fellow answered and said, This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of it. How do you get that? Now, this is the way I interpret my kids' dreams. You know, at breakfast a lot of times, y'all might do this, I don't know. At breakfast, somebody comes in, they're like, Man, I had a weird dream last night. I dreamed that. And then you interpret, well, that's saying that President Biden is going to win the next presidential election. That's it, because you dreamed that a teddy bear, ate a pillow that you were sleeping on last night. There's absolutely no relationship to anything whatsoever under the sun here. A barley cake rolls into the camp, knocks a tent down. The guy goes, oh no, this is Gideon, the son of Joash. But what this is, oh, by the way, I have this other book. This one's really funny. How to Interpret Dreams. This is in there. It makes it. And it shows all of the barley bread represents this and this. Folks, the barley bread represents nothing. It's barley bread. It's a loaf. It's a bran muffin, right? And not a very good one at that. I'd rather have a wheat one. A biscuit is better than the bran muffin. But anyway, the barley bread tumbles in, and his fellow answers, This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. For into his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. This reminds me of, well, who does it remind you of? Reminds me of Rahab, right? Because when the spies come in, Rahab says, we know who you are, we know why you've come, we know that God has done through you, we know what happened in Egypt, and we're scared to death of you, right? So God, what he's doing here is he is showing Gideon, I have put the fear of you. They know your name. Remember what Gideon said in chapter 6 when God first came to him. He says in verse 13, Gideon said unto him, he calls him, mighty man of valor. Oh, the Lord is with thee, mighty man of valor. And he's like, well, If the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us of, saying, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us. And the Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might. He said, O my Lord, wherewithal shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. Gideon is a nobody in his own eyes, in his own family, in his own tribe, and the Midianite host knows who he is, and they're terrified of him, and they know that they are going to fall to him. They know that he's going to have victory over them. Well, you talk about pump you up, wouldn't it? I mean, God has told you, I'm giving them into your hand, and then you go down and you listen to them. You know, you're sitting outside the other team's locker room, and instead of them in there, banging on stuff and beating stuff and pumping themselves up, right? They're in there going, oh, we're going to get killed, right? And you're like, yes. So he goes back to his locker room. And it was so when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof that he worshiped. Proper response. Just think about how many reasons Gideon has not to beat his chest and say, look what I did. This is nothing but God. The dream and the interpretation are totally unrelated to each other. The fact that the fear of Gideon, this mighty man of valor, is upon the Midianites. He's never done anything mighty or valorous in his entire life. And yet, this is the reputation that he has. I mean, you would think that Achilles was camped out against them. And it's this kid named Gideon. So he goes back and he worshiped. And he returned to the host of Israel and he said, Arise, for the Lord hath delivered into your hand the host of Midian. At this point now, he is extremely confident. And God has built him up to this. He has very mercifully, with kid gloves, handled Gideon in this situation, giving him his confirmation with the fleeces, giving him confirmation by letting him hear these things. And even though he's seen his army reduced to 300, don't you know he would have, that would have kind of made me have a little check, because I said, yikes. The 10,000, the reduction to 10,000 could have been, okay, God's going to, he's going to give us a victory. Yay, 10,000 against unlimited multitude. Great. But 300? Now we're in suicide range, right? But now he's pumped up because he knows that God's gone before him, and he divided the 300 men into 3 companies. And he put a trumpet in every man's hand and empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. Pitchers made out of clay, terracotta pitchers, I'm sure. And he said unto them, Look on me and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the outside of the camp, it shall be that as I do, so shall ye do. When I blow with the trumpet, I and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets, also on every side of the camp, and say, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Why does he say that? What do you think? They don't mention Israel. They just mention, that's capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. That's the name of God. Jehovah and Gideon. Because they know that the Midianites know who he is. And so they're gonna have this shout that's going to put the fear of God and of this mighty, valiant, conquering warrior named Gideon has surrounded them. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came unto the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. And they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. So if they have a light inside the pitcher, as soon as they break the pitcher, first there's this crashing sound, and then boom, light, right? So anybody seen Lost? There's a scene where Jack and Kate and some of them are out in the don't watch it. I don't recommend it. But anyway, they're out in the forest at night, and they're trying to find the other camp, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 flames all the way around them. These flames light up, and it's just creepy just to watch it. But if you've been standing there, you think you're just out in the middle of the jungle, and you're really completely surrounded. But on top of that is this terrible, awful crashing sound of these clay pitchers being broken, and the sound of something breaking. Today I was studying my Bible. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I was zoned in, prayerful. The Holy Spirit was leading me in this wonderful. And all of a sudden, some crashing sound happens in the kitchen, and somebody dropped something and broke. What was it? Salad dressing explodes all over that. I was terrified. Imagine if that had been hundreds of them breaking all the way. Anyway, this is psychological warfare. It's this loud sound, the light in the darkness, and they're completely surrounded. Now, they don't know there's just 300 men there. They think there could be 300,000. They're not going to have any idea. So, it says, and the three companies blew the trumpets, brake the pitchers, held the lamps in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they cried, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. In any direction that you go, there's more light and there's more sound. The initial breaking sound of the terracotta breaking, and then this trumpet blasting, 300 of them, all the way surrounding you. So if you try to run this way, there's light and sound, and you try to run this way, and they're just running over and amongst each other, and it's total pandemonium in the camp. It says, and the 300 blew the trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. In the darkness, they think they're being invaded, and they can't tell who's their friend and who's the foe, and so they start killing each other. And the host fled to Beth Shittah and Zareph, and to the border of Abel Meholah, and into Tabbath. These are all south and west of the Sea of Galilee, and the valley of Jezreel is where this all took place. Excuse me, if you want to take a look at your map sometime. I meant to print out a map for you, and I ran off and forgot it. But anyway, Sea of Galilee, Valley of Jezreel starts at Mount Carmel, runs south and east down to the Jordan Valley, and so it's taking place on the west side of the Jordan, right at where the Valley of Jezreel runs into the Jordan. The men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali and out of Asher and out of all of Manasseh and pursued after the Midianites. When this all begins to happen, the initial attack is by the 300, but once they begin fleeing, then the whole area just comes against them. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all Mount Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites and take before them the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and took the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. And they took two princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb. And they slew Oreb upon the rock Oreb, and Zeb they slew in the winepress of Zeb, and pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side Jordan. The reason that they're the winepress and the rock is because they weren't named that beforehand. They got named that because that's the place that these princes were captured and killed, and so they memorialized those places as a result of that. But the thing that I want us to take away from this is first of all, number one, God needs to get the glory for the victories in our life. You've got to be very careful. Mr. Barker has a good picture of it, but the girls played some volleyball the other day, and the Saints played the Red Devils, and it was kind of interesting. And the Saints were victorious, but of course, before any kind of game, the rah-rahs go out. The cheerleaders go out and they make signs. And so they get butcher paper, they come out, and they make these signs. This is what they do instead of going to school. I don't know when cheerleaders ever go to school, but they make signs. So anyway, they had this sign hanging up, and it said, "You can't stop our Red Devil pride." And I didn't notice it, but Mr. Barker pointed it out to me, and it's just this is the representation of a lost world. Pride. And they were the Red Devils. And gosh, I had a choice of which high school I could have gone to. The Devils, the Demons, they were blue, or the Coyotes. Well, and they were red. Well, I chose the Coyotes because who would want to be a demon? That's just... Oh, my North Carolina friends. I'm so sorry. The Blue Devils. Are they demons or devils? That's Duke, huh? Devils. Man. I don't want to be a devil or a demon, either one. Anyway, my point is pride is something all throughout Scripture that is denounced by God. There's not one place in Scripture that pride is pointed out as virtuous or as good. As a matter of fact, God says he opposes the proud. And so God intentionally sets this up to happen in this way so that there's no way at the end of the battle that they can go, look what we did. They don't have any choice but to go, look what God did. Not only that, but God gives Gideon incredible confirmation of what he's calling him to do. He didn't get to be like David and lead these massive legions into battle. He gets 300 at God's choosing. God intentionally reduces the army so that there's no pride and so that God gets all the glory for the victory. But in doing that, he's very careful with the way that he handles Gideon, making sure that Gideon knows that God is leading him in this direction. And I am a very firm believer that once you imagine in your life that you are a stone that's sitting on the edge of some kind of an incline, but you've sunk down just a little bit into the soft earth, okay? And it takes something to get you moving. But once you get moving, well, then you can begin to gain momentum. I firmly believe that a lot of times as God begins to call us and direct our lives, sometimes he has to give us a little nudge to kind of get the ball rolling, okay? Once the ball begins to roll, we're going in the general direction that God wants us to go. But at that point, then he comes along and he begins to direct us more accurately where he wants us to go. And I think that's exactly what we see with Gideon. Go to war against the idolatry of your people and call the people back to God. Go to war against the Midianites, but the way we're going to do it is I'm going to get all the glory, says the Lord, and you're going to have to do it my way because there's no other way to do it. And God he has a plan for us. He has good works for us. He has a direction for our lives. And if we will humbly come to him, and just like that, just like what he tells Gideon there, and he says, verse 10 of chapter 7, but if thou fear to go down, go thou with Purah thy servant down to the host. He doesn't even make it, I want to go down in there and listen to what they're saying. Lord, I don't want to go down there by myself. Well, take your buddy with you. See, he's accommodating to Gideon in this as he leads him in this direction. And then he goes down and hears this dream and the interpretation of it, and he's like, this can only be God, because there's no way that this Midianite draws this barley bread knocking the tent down out of, and actually there is a little bit to it. The barley bread would be the cheaper kind of bread rather than a wheat loaf. So Gideon, being the nobody, is kind of like the barley bread, and knocking the tent down, well, it's kind of odd that a loaf of bread would knock down a whole tent, and this small little warrior is going to take down the entire Midianite and Amalekite army. But for his buddy to go, well, I know exactly what this means. That's just this incredible confirmation for Gideon. I believe that God has confirmation for you and I too. But it's only going to come once we get the ball rolling. When Gideon was threshing wheat in the wine press, God had to come along and kind of give him a nudge. Go. So Gideon charges out, and then God begins to direct him in exactly the way that he wants him to go. And it gives him confirmation along the way. He'll do the same thing for you too, if you'll trust him. And if you will, it's okay to not understand what God wants for you. The thing that we really get in trouble with is when you know what God wants you to do and you say no. In that case, you get a slurp, a burp, and an erp, and see Jonah for that. So, all right, let's pray. Father, we love you. We praise you. We thank you for this day. And God, we're just grateful for the Word of God. Thank you for the passages about Gideon and Lord, just the direction and the confirmation of the call upon his life that you have for him. God, we know that you have called all of us to good works. that you have prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. Lord, we all have got things that you specifically want for us to do. And Lord, I just pray that you'd lead us and guide us and direct us in those things as we just faithfully follow Jesus. And Lord, when we stray, we pray that you would help us get right back to where we need to be. Thank you for this word tonight. We love you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. I love you. Glad you're here.